Every year, I make a habit to log and write short reviews of every game that I play. As a game designer, it helps keep my design senses sharp, and viewing games through an analytical lens helps me really understand what may or may not make a game work. So I thought, why not turn this into a series? And so I ranked every game that I played in 2025, both numerically ordered and on a tier list. Before we get started though, let's explain how this list works. First and foremost, these games are ranked strictly by my own enjoyment, how a game made me feel at the end of the day. If I set out to make a more objective best of all time list, it would be predictable and safe. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Some games on the lower end you might consider to be objectively better games than ones above it, and some games near the top you might consider to be greatly flawed. That's okay. Just remember that if your favorite game is here, I'm not saying it sucks. It may just have not clicked with me. Secondly, I did fully complete each game on the list. I try to avoid reviewing games I haven't finished. Unfortunately, this means I had to leave out some of my actual personal favorites from this year that I just haven't finished yet, like Hades 2. It also means I don't really know what to do with multiplayer games since you don't really ever complete them, so I just opted to avoid ranking them this time. With that being said, let's kick off the list. This game broke my heart. The biggest surprise to me is that IGN's 5 out of 10 score was completely justified. I grew up with the Mario & Luigi series all-timers like Bowser's Inside Story and Superstar Saga, but this one fell flat in so many different ways. The pacing was just horrendous. Right off the bat, I kind of felt like I was going to be in for a rough time. The game opens at such a snail's pace. It was hard to play for more than an hour at a time before getting completely bored. It takes so long to even get your hammers, something that is such a basic part of these games that is handed out quickly in the other titles. It did get better for a bit, and I would almost say that I liked it around the midpoint, but the game's final acts are just so terrible that it ruined any goodwill I had for the rest of the game. Content is dry and reused. Non-Mario characters are bland and uninteresting. Quests are boring, with some of the most underwhelming rewards of any RPG I have ever played. What even happened here? Look, there are good parts. I think the game for the most part visually looks pretty good. Mario and Luigi themselves are animated very well, and the combat's pretty okay. Unfortunately, everything else about this game kind of blows. I really wanted to like this one, but as the only D tier on the list, it's easily the worst game I played this year. I recognize that Gris is meant to be more like a playable piece of art rather than a game meant to be fun, and I do totally respect it. The visuals on display here are jaw-dropping, and there's clearly a very profound message to unravel. And I do think part of the fun comes in how you interpret what the game is showing you and really thinking about what it means. Unfortunately, I think it might just not be for me. Not really having much to chew on gameplay-wise made actually playing through this game kind of a drag. I just found the slow and repetitive platforming to be a little too grating to where I think it distracted me from the actual art on display here at times. Missing jumps, slowly repeating the same action sections over and over. This is just one I think I'm going to have to brush off as not my thing. I think if you're less gameplay driven than me though, and you just want to play a beautiful piece of art and really immerse yourself, you'll have a great time. This tiny indie game was interesting, but it has issues. Prodigal is a small top-down indie Zelda-like with some light life sim elements. I like Zelda games, and the premise of a top-down Zelda with life sim on the side sounded appealing. Unfortunately, I don't really think it stuck the landing. I don't think any particular system stuck out to me as the worst, but it was more just like the game does everything at the same level of just okay. The dungeon design is fine, but extremely straightforward, enjoyable to a degree, but they felt like a series of very simple puzzles in quick succession, rather than an interconnected puzzle room you need to solve. As for the life sim side, you spend a lot of time in the town, meeting its cast of quirky characters and slowly unraveling both the town's and your own past. It's cute, but it did have a lot of annoying issues. I think this game desperately needed a quest and character log. It was really easy to get confused about who's who and where to go. I think this game is just serviceable. I liked where it was going for maybe 70% of its runtime, but it kinda lost me in the last bit as it got off the rails pretty quickly. I was interested in going back to one of the older PS1 era Final Fantasy games, since I had never really played another Final Fantasy game outside of the 7 series, and Final Fantasy VIII had the vibes, but it got out of hand very quickly. The combat is weird, and I don't really know how I feel about it. On one hand, I really respect it for trying something new and wacky. The siphon and junction systems are incredibly strange, but they are still unique. Still, I don't think I like this one very much. All of my spells being consumables felt strange, and it took me longer than I'm willing to admit to fully understand junctioning. I didn't love the dynamic of needing to siphon skills off of enemies, and in my experience, it ended up just making the battles kind of a drag. This was just too big of an issue to look past for me. It made playing through the game a slog, and that's something that did really disappoint me. I did enjoy a lot of other things though. I think its soundtrack is amazing, and I really enjoyed the setting and overall story, although it kind of became hard to follow in the latter half. The main highlight here is obviously Squall and Rinoa's relationship and how it grows over their adventure. Overall, it's decent, but I don't like it as much as the original FF7. If you can get past the combat, there is an enjoyable time here. A decent game, but it doesn't live up to the series' heights. I've been a fan of this franchise for 6 years, and I've played every single mainline game except this one. Look, I know this game has kind of a cult following, with some swearing by it as the best Persona game. And like, I respect it for what it started and all, but it's just kind of fine. I was curious to play it since Persona 2 is my second favorite game in the series, but I just thought this one was a little weird. I think the main draw for this game is its vibe and its atmosphere. It has this ethereal, celestial vibe, if that makes sense. I played the PSP version with a patch that restores the PS1 version soundtrack, and I'm glad I played it this way as it made the atmosphere something special. It was easily my favorite thing about the game. The characters are just okay. I think obviously Maki is a highlight, and I like Mark a lot, but everyone else is just kind of whatever to me. I didn't know that half of the cast in this game is technically optional, so that was a bit of a shock when I went in. And it made me a little sad that I didn't get to experience all the characters. The combat is okay for what it's worth. I never found it particularly difficult until the final boss, and I found that the grid system is very underutilized. I do think the game is memorable, mainly for its atmosphere. The series has better to offer, but this isn't really a bad game either. As a huge SMT fan, I had high hopes, but it let me down. Anyone who knows me will know that I am also a complete sucker for Atlus games and the Megami Tensei franchise. This one is decent. I was really excited that this game was getting a remaster, because I've always been interested to play the Raidou series. Raidou as a character seemed really cool to me, but I never really got to playing any of those games until this remaster. I think I can say I generally like its combat and normal encounters. It was fun to see the turn-based SMT combat systems adapted to an action game. However, I think this game has some pretty terrible bosses. A lot of the times, I had to face a boss that just sucked all the joy I had out of what I was playing. Some are alright, but some can be incredibly frustrating, and almost all of them take entirely too long to take down. They often rely on unfun gimmicks, and they feel like a test of patience while your cat yells at you to use your gun, even though the gun in question does nothing at all. My worst memories with this game are in these boss fights. Other than that, the story was pretty fun, and it takes a lot of turns you wouldn't expect. Not a bad game by any means, but it didn't live up to the quality of what I consider to be a top-tier video game franchise. It's a fun time, but nothing more. For this ranking, I'm going to be mainly talking about Bowser's Fury. I played 3D World on the Wii U as a kid, but I never got to try Bowser's Fury until this package went on sale earlier this year. It's decent. I thought it was a fun little experiment for what an open-world 3D Mario could be like, though I don't know if I can see it fueling an entire game. In a way, that's a positive, as it felt like the experience was pretty well tailored to the scope of this expansion. I don't really have much to say about this one. Everything was pretty generally solid and charming, but I think some small issues drag it down, like needing to wait around for Fury Bowser to activate to grab a couple shines. It makes it a little tedious to complete, but it honestly is nothing bad. Naturally, I think my main issues with 3D World in general do carry over to this expansion. Compared to other 3D Mario games, it feels really bland and safe, and that makes it much less memorable than most of the other Mario adventures, but it certainly is still a quality title. A beloved title that I don't think I quite got the hype for. So it took me 3 years to finish this game. Not really. I played most of it in 2022 and then put it down because I got stuck. Picked it back up again this year on Switch 2 and finished it off. This is a really charming game that I kinda struggled to enjoy at times. I think it might have felt a little too obtuse for me at times, as there were quite a few points where I felt like I had zero direction as to where I needed to go next. I don't need these games to hold my hand through them, but I can only wander around aimlessly for so long until I feel like I'm going insane. The in-between moments where I was just slowly moving around the map searching for my next objective makes up most of the playtime with this one. I was always excited to jump into a new dungeon though. It is definitely a classic. I wish I could say more, but I played most of this game 3 years ago and only the vague emotions of how I feel about this game really remain. A first of this style for me, and it left me wanting more. I honestly don't have much to say about this one. Gravity Circuit is a Mega Man style action platformer, which I have surprisingly little experience with. I've never played a proper Mega Man game, so in a way, this was one of my first real experiences with the genre. And it's pretty good. The controls felt tight and responsive. The game has some truly great feedback and game feel that just keeps it addicting. Finding new abilities was always a joy, and the level design felt really good. If I had one critique, I felt like I didn't really use any of the optional abilities that you could buy. I was pretty content with the same stuff for most of the game, but it is nice that it's there anyway. In complete honesty, I'm writing this review like 9 months after I finished this game, and I don't really remember that much, so I guess it'll just be a shorter one today. It's a pretty good game, and I really need to play the Mega Man games eventually. I was promised hype moments in Aura, and that's what I got. Okay, so I've never actually played a Metal Gear game other than this. I recognize it's kind of wacky to start here of all places, but it went on a decent sale, and I was feeling kind of funny, so I just said whatever, let's do it. The game is pretty fun. I think the overall narrative was decent, although I really am missing the context of the entire Metal Gear franchise, so take that with a grain of salt. Really, I was just here for the boss fights and the music, and those did not disappoint. I loved fighting the bosses in this game to the incredible music, and hearing them say some really wacky stuff, and just watching cool stuff happen. I kind of felt like a 12-year-old boy just waiting for hype fight scenes and cool moments, but whatever. It's fun to indulge sometimes. I had a good time. I will say I didn't love some of the game's main mission gameplay outside of combat. It was fine, but just nothing special. Overall, this was a really fun time. Oh boy, I was dreading reviewing this one because I did not like this game nearly as much as everyone else. Look, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is not a bad game. Unfortunately, while I can recognize the quality of the pieces at play here, I ultimately walked away feeling absolutely nothing. Look, the story is good, its characters are written well, but I didn't really feel like I cared about most of them. I think a couple of your party members are oddly forgettable. Music is awesome, art is great, the pieces feel strong individually, but okay. I think this game's combat is what really brought down the game for me. I felt like the real-time action elements detract from what make turn-based games so fun to begin with. Every encounter's difficulty in this game pretty much comes down to how well you can dodge or parry its moves. If you can evade, then pretty much nothing in this game can touch you, and it's what gave the combat system a very hollow feel to me. Every new enemy I encountered was just about learning parry timings. It completely threw strategy out the window. Parrying isn't hard either, so it very quickly becomes the optimal strategy. Combine that with the ridiculous power creep of stats and moves, and you can basically have characters dishing out the damage cap 5 hours into the story. I can very confidently say that outside of a very select few optional super bosses, this game was way too easy. I also feel like I don't love this game's visuals. On paper, there's some fantastic art direction here, but I feel like it gets muddied by some really Unreal Engine 5 looking parts. Lots of dithering, lots of smearing, and a lot of grain. Of course, while staying spoiler-free, I think the most I can say about the story is that it was really good up to a point, and then after that point, I just lost all interest. I really do think this is a fine game, I don't know. I guess it didn't click with me. It was fun, but I feel like there have been better. Twilight Princess is definitely the most grand and ambitious of the classic linear 3D Zelda games, and it has maybe the best story out of any of them, second to only Skyward Sword. Midna is a great character, and she surprised me with her story in particular. The gameplay was great throughout, barring the ridiculous opening, with combat shining the brightest, with the hidden skills enhancing the swordplay by an incredible degree. The dungeons were very well designed for the most part, but I felt like the first 3 were a little bland and uninspired, and they repeated beats from Ocarina of Time almost verbatim, which made it less interesting to me. I think where I'm let down the most is exploration. Hyrule Field feels vast and open, but after looking for more than a couple seconds, you realize it's very empty with not a ton to find other than bugs and the odd heart piece. Then there's the art style, which is down to personal preference. I never cared for this art style until I played it, and I downright disliked it as a kid. This time around, it grew on me a lot more to where I can say I actually generally like it. Link looks really cool, and key characters do as well, but I think I still prefer the Wind Waker art style 10 times over, and I can say that without any hesitation. Overall, I had a ton of fun with this, but I wouldn't say it blew me away. There's a pretty good Zelda experience here, but it isn't one that has proved particularly memorable for me. A wonderful game, but not one that lives up to its predecessor. As with a lot of people, I got swept up into the Silksong hype as it was about to launch. I was so excited to dive in and get lost in this new world. And, well, I don't think I liked this one as much as Hollow Knight. Silksong is a good game, a great game. I just want to preface this review by saying that I think Silksong is incredible, and it's one of the most memorable gaming experiences I had this year. But that's not to say that I didn't have issues with it. I loved exploring the world. This game's sense of discovery is incredible. Hornet feels great to control, and I will say that she is so much more fun to play as than the Knight. This world was such a delight to explore, and the entire game is so memorable. But first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. This game wore me down, and I was kind of shocked because I kind of breezed through Hollow Knight with no issue. But this game is just unforgiving. I think it crossed a line for me where it started to feel less fun and more tedious. Slogging through these areas, always just 1 or 2 mistakes away from losing it all, it was just a lot to keep up for this game's very long runtime. More often in this game, I felt like I just hit walls where I had no other choice but to smack into them until it was over. And while I'm on this, I want to talk about death runs. You know, when you die and you leave that cocoon in the spot where you bit it. I feel like the inclusion of this mechanic was in direct opposition to what Team Cherry has said they intended for players to do. Explore other options and either get stronger or circumvent the challenge. I get what they were going for, I really do. But with an economy as tight as Silksong's, losing your silk upgrades and all of your hard-earned cash unless you waltz right back up to the same boss room you died in before makes it pretty hard to just pick a different path. That's not to say it's all bad. I did still adore the art and music, and there were certainly parts where its brilliance shines through, but I just think Hollow Knight had an overall better balance of its systems. I think Silksong is still a wonderful game, and if you liked this level of challenge, then this is a truly special game for you. But of course, this is just my opinion, and this list is only ranked by my own experiences, not objective quality. Despite all of this, I still had an amazing time with Silksong, and I think it's one of the most memorable experiences I had this year. Even though it frustrated me a lot, it didn't prevent its best aspects from shining bright. Hailed as the best of all time, it was great, but not my favorite. Now hey, before you get really pissed off, I'm not saying it's a bad game in any capacity. I just think it might not be for me. I think there was clearly a lot of love and care put into this game's world, and every corner of it is filled with these hidden secrets and stuff to discover. The combat is great, the bosses are cool, and if you're into it, I'm sure there's a ton for you to dig into here. You know, despite everyone always freaking out about how difficult this game is, I actually didn't find it very hard at all. Sure, the bosses can put up a bit of a challenge, but I felt like the game gives you more than enough options to turn the tides back in your favor. I never struggled on really any main story boss for too long. I think for me, what I could never really fully connect with was the setting, the story, and just kind of the overall vibe. I just think this whole dark fantasy thing isn't my style. It really is just a me thing, but I found myself really struggling to connect in any meaningful way with the game's world and characters. No characters were very interesting to me, and I didn't really understand any of the story, and I just don't care for the world enough to dig into the lore. There was really just nothing I felt like I could attach myself to, and unfortunately, I think it just made this game a little bit forgettable for me. I did still like actually playing this game. I think its gameplay is incredible, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. I just really wish I could love it as much as everyone else does, and it certainly is a game that, by all means, is an incredible feat of design. But this is my list, and it isn't quite hitting S tier for me. Even though it's controversial, I thought it was honestly a great time. This game tries to take some of the open-endedness that games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have, and blend it with a traditional 2D Zelda game. And I think it accomplished this very well. The echo mechanic is such a unique premise for a game like this, and it was fun to just constantly find new ones and try them out. I enjoyed the dungeons for the most part, and the story was simple, but I found myself more attached to it than I thought I would be. Obviously, it does have its problems. It does have some pretty egregious UI usability issues when you have a lot of echoes, and the performance can be really rough at times, though it is worth noting that an eventual free Switch 2 update fixed these problems. Eventually, constantly using the same echoes like beds and water did start to feel a bit repetitive, but honestly, I wasn't bothered by it much. Overall, I found this to be a great 2D Zelda game. Its premise is cool and unique, and it was a memorable adventure full of charm and character. It was a great experimental title, but I wouldn't be upset if we returned to the more traditional format after this. I've never really been into horror games. I despise jump scares, chicken out way too easily, and I don't love the feeling of being terrified. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, never touched them. Still, when October rolled around, I was determined to try to broaden my horizons, and in the spirit of the month, I gave Crow Country a shot. This game pulled me in as its atmosphere, map, and story coalesce into this amazing experience. Slowly opening up access to the map, running around scrambling for ammo, and solving clever puzzles was just such a great time, but it's the story that kept me sucked in. Much like the gameplay itself, the story starts off fairly simple. But as you dive deeper and deeper, unraveling more and more, it starts to become more evident that there's a lot more going on than it seems. This game isn't long, but it was paced perfectly, leading up to an incredible, very memorable finale. I had played Majora's Mask as a kid, but never finished it. This is one of the most unique games in the entire franchise. I played the 3DS version with the Majora's Mask Project Restoration mod that fixes a lot of people's biggest issues with the 3DS version of this game. Overall, I thought Majora's Mask was an amazing game, even if unconventional. The game's tone is very dark in a way that we really haven't seen since. There's a real sense of grief and sorrow that fills the entire game, and it's extremely memorable. Watching the moon get closer and closer throughout the 3-day cycle is a constant reminder of your impending doom. As a Zelda game, I think it's alright. There's only 4 dungeons, and I think most of these are pretty weak until you get to the Stone Tower Temple, which is awesome. The 3-day cycle was a really interesting mechanic, even if it managed to get a little bit annoying sometimes. Masks are also super cool, and getting a new one was always very rewarding and exciting. Of the actual main content here, it's definitely not the strongest this franchise has to offer. However, Majora's Mask gets one thing so insanely right that I think it overshadows anything else: the NPCs and the side quests. Each NPC has a schedule, a routine, a life to live, a job to work. Exploring Clocktown, learning about these characters, helping solve their problems, and watching how they react to the impending doom before them was such a deeply emotional experience, and in a way that I haven't really gotten from this series before, which is the real magic of Majora's Mask. I had played Three Houses on Switch years ago, and enjoyed that game a lot, but I just never made the jump to any of the older titles for some reason. So this year, I finally changed that. Fire Emblem Awakening is just such a wonderful game from start to finish. Characters are fun, the story is engaging, even if simple. The visuals are charming, and the music is great. But where this game shone brightest for me was in its combat. The tactics gameplay here is amazing as usual. It's fast, snappy, and dare I say better than what I played in Three Houses. This is down to one crucial reason: the pair-up mechanic. Pairing up units was such a fun and interesting addition to the normal gameplay, and it enhanced the battles a lot for me. Hiding squishy units and tanky ones, using fast units as vehicles for slower ones, how it interacts with the support system. It was just that extra layer on top of the already good Fire Emblem gameplay that just made it that much better. No matter how simple the plot felt, I did still feel like it was enough to pull me in. After all, I'm a sucker for a good power of friendship trope. Awakening is a great game, and it's definitely a top RPG on the 3DS. Growing up, I always wanted to play the first Luigi's Mansion. I'd played many GameCube games in my childhood through the Wii's backwards compatibility, but sadly Luigi's Mansion was just a game I could never find a copy of. I did eventually go on to play both 2 and 3, but this was the first time that I've played the original to completion, and it's a blast. What a weird and quirky game this is. It just oozes personality. Unlocking bits of the mansion feels rewarding, and the ghost catching gameplay is simple but effective. This is another game that I think really thrives on its atmosphere. The game is short in the best way possible. Playing through this every Halloween season basically becomes tradition for many, and I think it's one that I might adopt as well. I did actually get a pretty poor rank when I finished, so maybe next year is my chance to lock in and get that mansion. All in all, it's a joy to play through, and it's a game that has aged super well. Now, I know jumping into the 5th game as my first Devil May Cry game is frowned upon, but honestly, it looked like such a great game and I couldn't help myself, and I'm so glad that I played it. Apart from the ridiculous choreography and insane cutscenes, Devil May Cry 5 is just peak character action combat. Everything has the perfect sense of weight, movesets are intuitive but complex, and I always felt a desire to improve and try for better ranks. Where it really clicked, however, was once I got to play as Dante. It's almost comical how many options this guy has. Where that would normally be a negative, I felt like they rolled out all the mechanics at the perfect pace, and it kept me on my toes. Whenever I started to feel like I was getting everything, they threw another layer on me to consider. It was a hard character to play, but one that felt insanely rewarding to learn. The story was also very enjoyable, even though I'm new to the franchise, though I'm sure playing this after having played the previous games is a whole different beast. If I had any gripes at all, it's that I didn't love playing as V, but his missions are pretty few and far between, and it wasn't so bad that it ruined anything for me. This is one of the most insane games I've ever played, in the best way possible. Maybe I'll find myself going back and playing the rest of the series. What a wonderful little game. It brought me back to my childhood, and the simplicity of exploring the schoolyard with friends and getting up to who knows what. The game is super charming, and it's oozing personality out of every pixel and line of text. The exploration is rewarding and addicting, and there's plenty of fun surprises and challenges to find. Honestly, I just don't know what else to say about it. It's extremely short to its own benefit, like spending a few hours in your backyard. This was such a memorable 4-hour journey that I'm so glad I played. One thing I need to highlight though is the music. I think the beautiful compositions and warm melodies made exploring this place feel so much more magical. I think it was surprisingly powerful, and everything came together to give me a vibe that I truly did not expect to feel so strongly about. I actually started this game all the way back in 2017, where it unfortunately failed to grab me. I gave it multiple tries, but I would always get really bored at the beginning, and I was just prepared to give up and accept that Hollow Knight was just not for me. That was, until the release date for Silksong was revealed, and because of a deal I'd made with a friend, it was time to jump back in and give it another try. And man, I was really glad that I did. Hollow Knight was just a magical experience. I found that after I had pushed past the admittedly slow and boring beginning, I started to feel a sense of immersion in this dark and weird world. The art is just wonderful, the music is great, the atmosphere is just perfect. Slowly unwrapping more and more of this world was so addicting for a time. Talks of this game's difficulty scared me, but I actually found that this game was not that bad at all. I actually struggled very little, and the times when I did die, it felt like it was fair and I knew what I had to do to improve. Overall, this was just a joy to play, and I'm glad I finally gave it a 4th shot, I think? Well, it was the one that worked. One of the strongest classic Zeldas, and one that aged like a fine wine. The Wind Waker is a game I played as a child, but my Wii's disk drive stopped working when I was halfway through the game, so I never got to finish it. I'm finally going back and finishing what my 8-year-old past self started, except with the HD port. And yeah, Wind Waker is amazing. I loved every second playing this game. The art style is incredibly charming and holds up beautifully, and the animation is so expressive and fun. There's a real sense of character to everything in this game. Its dungeon design is admittedly not the strongest, but I still had fun with them. with the last two definitely being highlights for me. Though, in my opinion, where this game shined brightest was the Great Sea itself. I loved sailing through unknown territory, finding islands, sunken treasure, secrets. It had some of the greatest sense of adventure I'd ever gotten from a Zelda game. The final act is definitely controversial, but I didn't really mind it. I found the Triforce Shard quest kind of fun, but I also never played this part in the original game, so I don't really know how much HD changed it. Its narrative is surprisingly great too, with a final showdown that is just incredibly memorable. It may not be the best in class when it comes to its execution of all of its ideas, but for me at least, the Wind Waker is greater than the sum of its parts. One of the most inventive 3D platformers in recent years, and a fantastic one at that. Donkey Kong Bananza is an incredible 3D platformer, though I would say it sometimes leans more on action than platforming. Look, I was skeptical when this game was first announced. I really wanted a brand new 3D Mario game, and DK basically taking that slot was completely unexpected. I also previously had very little connection to the Donkey Kong franchise, having only played Country Returns on the Wii before, and honestly, I didn't love that game. Regardless of what I thought about DK, I decided to give it a shot anyway, as seeing the actual game looked great, and I was not disappointed at all. The destruction tech in this game is a marvel, and the fact that the game's design doesn't break with this level of freedom is seriously impressive. The story surprised me with how much I enjoyed it too. Of course it's no Shakespeare, but Pauline goes through a very satisfying character arc, and the core narrative is just really charming. I also liked Voidco more than I initially expected to. My favorite feature in this game though is the skill tree. I feel like it fundamentally solves Super Mario Odyssey's moon problem, by making each collectible progress your skill set meaningfully, instead of just filling a checkbox. If I had any critiques, it's that bosses were way too easy, and I don't think I used the Bananza transformations as much as I felt like I should have. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't enough to detract from what this game got right. And that finale though, that's all I can say. When I went into Chrono Trigger this year, I was expecting it to be good, but I felt like it might have been overhyped by the people who grew up with it. I'm pleasantly surprised to say that it's just as good as everyone says it is. I'm amazed at just how well this game aged for an RPG from 1995. No random encounters, overworld combat arenas, reserve party leveling, good balancing, little to no grinding, and the tech system, which was probably my favorite thing about this game. Dual techs are seriously cool, and they encouraged me to try a lot of different party compositions to see what was possible. The story is also extremely charming, and exploring the different eras never got old. It gives you this feeling of slowly unraveling the history of this world, seeing it firsthand, and putting the pieces together. Seriously, reaching Zeal for the first time? Man, what a cool moment. The characters are so memorable, and the soundtrack, it's just amazing. Chrono Trigger is an all-timer, and I'm so glad that I finally got to give it a shot. The second game in the Final Fantasy VII Remake project is so grand and filled with all kinds of stuff that it's probably one of the hardest reviews to write and keep concise. The short answer is that I loved it to bits. The characters and story continue to be top tier. I know the 7 Remake trilogy is controversial for its changes, and while I understand that, I think what they're attempting to do with this trilogy is so incredibly special. Trying something new instead of just making a simple remake, in my opinion, was a bold choice. And I had mixed feelings back in 2020, but after Rebirth, I ultimately think it was the right one. Some complain about bloat, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. I do think some of the field activities started to feel a little bit too repetitive in the late game, but it wasn't as big of a deal to me as it seemed to be for others. Everything else is just a straight upgrade from Remake. Combat, better. Visuals, better. Shimmy spaces, gone. Side quests, much better. Ending, confusing, but I'm here for it. I truly don't have time to go over everything I loved about this game, so I'll leave it here for now. Finally, that brings us to number 1 up next. Even if unfinished, It's a game that has resonated with me unlike any other. One thing you should know about me is that Undertale is my favorite game of all time, and that containing my thoughts into this tiny review might be the hardest thing I've ever done. Deltarune isn't finished yet, which is why I held off on properly reviewing this for so long, but honestly, I can't stop myself this time, and it's my list, so whatever. I don't think I've ever played something so specifically tailor-made for me. The more chapters I get to play, the more and more I fall in love with something I didn't even think I had the capacity to love even more. Chapters 1 and 2 were already amazing, but after Chapter 3 and especially Chapter 4, I can't even describe it. It's just peak, man. I feel like it has everything for me. The characters, the writing, the music. It knows when to make you laugh, it knows when to make you cry. I really don't think I'm ready for when this game's ending finally arrives. As long as the waits between chapters have been, I'm so glad I got to be here from the beginning and experience every chapter drop. I just really cannot say anything else. If you played it, you know what I mean. If you haven't, there's not much more I can say without ruining its most impactful moments. If it was complete, I'd say it was the game of the year. But out of complete fairness, I don't think I'm ready to award this game that title until all 7 chapters are out. Regardless of that, it's definitely my favorite single experience of the year by a long shot. For now, it'll just have to be game of the year in my heart. I need Chapter 5. Save me, Toby Fox. And there we have it. That was every game I completed in 2025. What did you think? The lineup this year was definitely filled with a lot of variety, and I'm glad it turned out that way. This was a really fun project to do, and looking back on my year of games was an engaging and thought-provoking exercise, especially as a game designer. I hope you got some value out of it too. If you enjoyed this video and want to see similar content, consider subscribing. I'd love to do this series again next year and document more of my thoughts throughout the year. Thanks for watching.